The metal groaned under his boots as Samuel Rourke walked the narrow, rust-eaten corridor between forgotten war machines and obsolete shuttles. The wind sliced through the jagged hulks, carrying with it the stench of oxidized circuits and decaying memory cores. This was peace now, not the kind with flags or medals, but the kind that settled like dust, silent, heavy, and inescapable. He was a man cut from a dying century, one who had survived the screaming stars and political betrayals, only to retire in a place where even scavengers had given up. Every morning, he combed the yard like a ritual. Not for parts he needed, but for the sake of movement. Motion kept the ghosts dull. There were no neighbors, no prying eyes, only remnants of forgotten civilizations half buried in sand and metal. The outpost had once been a galactic nexus before hyperspace routes shifted and trade lines died. Now, it was just Samuel and the junk. He was elbow-deep in a half-collapsed cargo hauler when the sound came, so soft he almost dismissed it as a failing servo. A dry, guttural rasp. Animalistic, weak. Not metal. Organic. He paused. It came again, a shiver in the silence. He moved toward it, pushing aside a tangled mess of wiring and steel sheets. His flashlight caught something breathing beneath it all, barely visible. He knelt slowly. There it was. A creature black as voidstone, sprawled in a contorted heap. Its ribs jutted through patches of mangled fur and scaled tissue. A front limb twisted at an unnatural angle. The head, broad and feline, lifted sluggishly. One eye was swollen shut, the other burned amber, unblinking, full of pain. It didn't snarl. It didn't growl. It just looked at him, as if trying to measure the weight of his soul. Samuel didn't move for a long moment. He'd seen abominations in the war. Hybrids grown in tubes, sentient minds with teeth, entire species broken under the boot of necessity. But this wasn't one of them. It was wrong in a different way. Forgotten, discarded. Ugly, yes. But not evil. It wasn't defending itself. It wasn't asking for help. It was done. You waiting to die, huh? Samuel muttered. The eye didn't blink. He stood. He should have walked. Let it rot. It wasn't his war anymore. Whatever it was, it had nothing to do with him. But as he turned, he heard the softest shuffle of movement behind him, not aggression, just an attempt to follow. It collapsed again with a wheeze. He sighed deeply. His knees popped as he crouched again. God damn it! It took nearly an hour to drag the thing out. He wrapped its limb in a splint fashioned from carbon rods and sealed wounds with salvaged dermoplast. It was unconscious most of the way, a ragdoll of sinew and bone. At his outpost, he lowered it onto the workbench he usually used for processors. He sterilized what he could, purged parasites, and flushed its bloodstream with diluted stimulant packs. It didn't respond, except to flinch when his hand brushed its neck. He didn't blame it. For 3 days, it lay silent. He worked around it, occasionally checking its vitals with a hacked med drone. He wasn't sure why he kept feeding it, or why he started talking to it in the dead hours between power cycles. Maybe he just wanted to hear a voice, even if it was his own. He named it Shade, not out of sentiment, but because it moved like one in his memory, just enough to trigger instincts honed in dark corridors and burning starships. On the 4th day, Shade opened both eyes. It didn't growl. It didn't run. It just stared. And then, slowly, it pulled the half-eaten ration pack closer and began to chew. Samuel leaned against the wall, arms crossed, and let out a dry chuckle. Guess you're not ready to go, after all. The junkyard remained quiet. The galaxies didn't care. But something shifted that day, not in the universe, but in the silence between two living beings who had both been tossed aside by the same ungrateful stars. Neither belonged. Neither asked for redemption. But perhaps, in that desolate graveyard of machines and memories, both had found a reason not to vanish just yet. Shade's breathing grew steadier by the day, though its body still bore the bruises of neglect and torment. Samuel adjusted the med wrap on its shoulder, securing the biogel infusion tube into place. The creature flinched but didn't snap. That was progress. Samuel had treated battlefield wounds uglier than this, but none on something so quiet. Shade never whined, never thrashed. It endured. That was familiar. The outpost's power grid flickered again, overstretched from rerouted connections to Shade's recovery pod. Samuel had rigged the thing from an old cryostasis chamber, retrofitted to function like a hybrid ICU. Cooling systems, pulse readers, light sedatives, all scavenged. He didn't expect gratitude. He didn't even know why he was doing this. Maybe because no one else would. Shade began to move on its own by the end of the first week. Not walking, more like dragging itself across the floor in slow circles, careful not to place weight on its damaged leg. Samuel noticed how it avoided the drone tools, how its eyes tracked every movement with surgical awareness. No wasted effort. It wasn't just surviving. It was studying. Learning. He spoke more, not out of obligation, but out of habit. Stories from the old wars, commanders who went mad from starlight, pirate ambushes near ice moons. He wasn't sure if Shade understood a word. But sometimes, when he hit a pause, the creature would blink or shift, always in time with the beat of silence that followed his memories. It was listening. Shade refused protein slop from ration packs. Samuel had to trick it at first, blending nutrient gels with sterilized meat until it stopped refusing the bowl. When it began growling at the sight of his tools, Samuel stopped bringing them near. He adapted. The creature responded. The bond grew, unspoken but unmistakable. One afternoon, while welding a new actuator joint onto a fallen shuttle wing, Samuel felt eyes on him. He turned. Shade was upright, front legs tense, watching from the shadows. No sound, no threat, just an unwavering stare. Its body still trembled from exertion, but it held posture like a soldier under inspection. Samuel gave a slow nod. Shade blinked once and settled down again. A week later, the junkyard received uninvited company. 3 scavengers in patched suits breached the perimeter fence. Samuel barely had time to grab his pulse rifle when he heard a scream, not his. One intruder was on the ground, bleeding from a gash across his forearm. The others fled. Shade stood over the injured man, body low, shoulders taut, eyes glowing faint orange. Samuel barked an order, half expecting nothing. But Shade backed away instantly. No hesitation. Just obedience. He dragged the wounded scavenger to the edge of the yard and dumped him outside the gates with a warning, "Don't come back." Word would spread. That wasn't ideal, but unavoidable. When he returned, Shade was licking its injured paw, ignoring the blood on its flank. He scanned it again that night. Biometrics had changed. The limb was healing faster than it should. The internal cellular structure showed traces of reinforced latticework, organic nanowires interwoven with tissue. But the most startling find was behind the left eye socket, a dormant neuromodulator, something reserved for sentient command units. Not beasts. Not pets. That didn't align with anything Samuel knew. Shade wasn't a product of nature, nor a random mutation. Someone had made it, designed it to think, to choose, and likely to kill. And yet, it had not once tried to harm him. Not when injured, not when cornered. Not even now, when it had regained enough strength to tear him apart in seconds. He sat at his console long after the scans were done, staring at the data. If the military had made Shade, then it was Black Ops, off-grid, unsanctioned. Something buried. He'd seen it before. Weapons built in secret, then abandoned when the war ended or when control was lost. Shade was never meant to be found. Still, Samuel didn't report it. He wiped the data clean and burned the backups. Whatever Shade was, it had defended him. That counted. The galaxy had no patience for loyalty anymore, no place for relics. But Samuel wasn't interested in the galaxy's judgment. Shade limped into the room later and curled near the bench where Samuel kept his tools. It watched him for a long moment before resting its head on its paws. For the first time in years, Samuel didn't feel like the last soldier left behind. The buzz came first, barely audible, but distinct. Samuel looked up from his console and caught the sharp flicker of something slicing across the sky. Not local wildlife. Not atmospheric debris. A drone. Sleek, silent, military grade. Shade stood perfectly still beside the wall, eyes narrowed, tracking the same shape until it vanished beyond the scrapyard's ridge. That made 3 in 2 days. Samuel activated the jammer net, routing a makeshift signal scrambler through an old mining relay tower. It wouldn't stop them for long, but it might delay whoever was watching. Shade paced once and lay down, muscles taut. Its fur bristled, not fear, but recognition. That night, Samuel heard the crunch of boots on gravel. He stepped out with his rifle slung low. A woman stood near the fence line, arms crossed, coat dusted in travel grime. Race. Last time he'd seen her, they were both pinned behind an overturned shuttle outside the Cried-In line. She'd aged, but her eyes were still sharp. "You always had a thing for impossible odds," she said. "You always had a thing for following trouble." She didn't smile. "Something got loose. The council's pretending it didn't happen. Backchannel traffic says it's a relic from the old war labs. Bioweapon with autonomous targeting and adaptive cognition." Samuel didn't answer. She studied him. "You found it, didn't you?" He didn't confirm or deny. She didn't press. That was the old soldier code. "If they track it here, they won't negotiate," she continued. "They'll sanitize the site. Deniability's worth more than evidence." "Noted." Reyes stepped forward, lowering her voice. "Do you know what it is?" "Not entirely. If it was Chimera class, that makes it pre-treaty. Prohibited tech. It was supposed to be shut down, not buried." Samuel looked toward the shelter where Shade slept. Then someone lied. When she left, he watched her disappear into the night, her transport lifting in silence. He knew she wouldn't report him. But others wouldn't hesitate. The following morning, he tried to skin Shade again. This time, the creature recoiled, not out of aggression, but something closer to panic. Samuel shut down the scanner, whispering soft reassurances. The reaction wasn't random, it had remembered something. He sifted through corrupted archives from his service days, digging into restricted files he'd copied years ago. Buried among protocols and fragment logs, he found references to Project Graven, a sub-initiative under the Chimera umbrella. Unlike the combat beasts that had been terminated, these were designed as command vectors, capable of syncing to battlefield systems, rerouting entire arsenals, even accessing secure frequencies through neural resonance. That explained the drones. Someone was trying to re-establish a link. It also meant Shade wasn't just a weapon, it had been the center of a weapons system. Not programmed to destroy indiscriminately, but built to think, to analyze threats and react independently. When the war ended, anything that advanced should have been destroyed. But clearly, Shade had been dumped instead, left to degrade in a place no one would look. Later that week, another drone appeared, this one closer. Samuel shot it down, examined the wreckage. It carried no markings. Custom make. Black budget work. Whoever wanted Shade back wasn't tied to an official chain of command. He returned to the shelter to find Shade standing upright, its back arched, eyes locked onto something only it could sense. When Samuel entered, Shade relaxed. That was the moment he realized it had made a choice. It had seen enough data, observed enough actions, and decided where it stood. He began installing an interface core beneath the floor, old tech, encrypted, drawn from the last signal module he hadn't sold. He connected it to the array and let Shade near it. The creature sniffed, tapped it with a claw, and the core lit up instantly. That night, the outpost's security grid realigned. Defense turrets, long dormant, flickered to life. Not at his command, but Shade's. It wasn't hijacking the system, it was cooperating. Sharing control. Samuel leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the quiet figure curled near the doorway. "You're not broken," he said. "You were just waiting." Shade didn't move, but he knew it understood. Outside, the wind picked up. Samuel knew time was short. But now he wasn't just sheltering something dangerous. He was preparing for what would come next. Not because he wanted to fight again, but because, for the first time in years, he wasn't alone. The night cracked open with the sharp hiss of plasma rounds striking metal. Samuel jolted awake to a cascade of explosions that ripped through the west perimeter. Shade was already moving, a blur of dark muscle weaving through debris. The first team had come fast, no warning, no signals. Pure elimination protocol. He'd known this was inevitable. He grabbed the pulse rifle, checked the charge. The outpost's auto-defense grid roared online, cannons tracking motion across the junk ridge. Drones dropped in clusters, deploying soldiers with active cloaks and silenced weapons. Not scavengers. Not mercs. Military. Black Ops. The kind sent to make a story disappear. They underestimated the terrain. Shade struck first, leaping from above with surgical precision. Its claws tore through composite armor before the target had time to scream. Another turned to fire but caught a burst of electrified shrapnel from a trap Samuel rigged weeks ago. The outpost wasn't just a junkyard anymore, it was a fortress buried in memory and wires. Samuel moved with practiced calm, slipping between barricades, signaling turret shifts, guiding Shade through overlapping fire zones. The creature didn't hesitate. It adapted instantly. When a squad cornered Samuel near the collapsed refueling station, Shade tore through them before they fired a second shot. They weren't prepared for something thinking faster than their command chain. A shockwave split the air as a dropship descended at the far end of the compound, deploying heavier units. Exocets. Plasma lances. Command-level firepower. Samuel ducked as beams scorched the dirt around him. One grazed his shoulder, melted fabric, seared skin. He bit back the pain and rerouted the outer shields manually. Shade took a hit too, left flank, but stayed upright. Blood ran, but it didn't stop. It pivoted, recalibrated its stance, and struck again. This wasn't just defense anymore. It was war. He activated the deep-level command codes in the interface core. Shade responded immediately. Not in rage, not like a beast. It synced. Systems across the outpost lit up, dormant machinery reconfigured itself, assembling makeshift artillery from scrap. Old turrets reactivated, realigned with Shade's targeting input. The creature didn't just fight, it directed. Calculated. Commanded. The attackers pushed harder, but the yard fought back harder still. In the chaos, Samuel saw one figure break from formation, a handler class. Specialized techs trained to control or neutralize synthetic life. He raised a coded baton, issuing a fail-safe command. Shade halted, twitching, eyes flaring. A stun pulse hit it square in the chest. It dropped. Samuel screamed, unloading his rifle into the tech before the man hit the ground. Then he ran. Shade's body trembled, flickering between instinct and suppression. The fail-safe command had triggered something old, burned deep in its nervous core. He reached it, slammed the override module onto its spine, one last gamble from a war that never ended. The code didn't reject. It merged. Shade's body seized, then arched violently. Light surged from the implants under its skin. Then silence. A single breath. Shade rose slowly. No longer shaking. No longer confused. The targeting systems rebooted behind its eyes, but this time, something else clicked into place. Not rage. Not code. Control. It moved like gravity had changed. The remaining soldiers began to retreat. But Shade didn't chase. It raised its head, issued a deep, low-frequency sound that echoed across the junkyard. Samuel watched the feeds. The entire system pulsed once, syncing with Shade's core. The last drone dropped. The yard went still. They had won. Not by sheer firepower. Not by luck. By trust. Shade had let go of the leash buried in its memory. And in doing so, it had chosen to fight with Samuel, not for him. That distinction mattered. Later, Samuel sat against a shattered wall, clutching his shoulder. Shade settled beside him, chest heaving from exertion. Neither spoke. No words were necessary. The outpost smoldered. Bodies were ash. Equipment was silent. They knew this wasn't the end. Whoever had sent that team wouldn't accept failure quietly. More would come. With bigger guns. Smarter minds. But next time, they wouldn't be caught off guard. Shade wasn't a lost creature anymore. Samuel wasn't just a relic waiting to die. They were something else now. Together. Ready. Rumors traveled faster than ships. Whispers of a ghost veteran and his shadow beast echoing through derelict colonies, vanished outposts, and unmarked graves. Survivors spoke of a creature that bled code and fury, and a man whose silence could unnerve even the most seasoned merc. Most dismissed it as war-born myth. The ones who knew better stayed quiet. Samuel no longer tracked days. He'd abandoned the calendar when the fourth skirmish ended and the dust refused to settle. Now they moved with purpose, system to system, guided not by vengeance but by signs, collapsed facilities, genetic graveyards, hidden vaults once used to birth beings like Shade. None remained intact. What they found instead were remnants. Broken hybrids, discarded prototypes, some alive, many barely clinging. But Shade recognized them. Without hesitation, it acted, freeing, healing, sometimes putting them down when the damage was irreversible. Samuel didn't interfere. This was Shade's reckoning, not his. As the pack grew, so did the message. Colonies once silenced by crime rings or abandoned by central authority found themselves guarded by creatures once labeled monstrous. They patrolled perimeters, defended freight caravans, watched over children without names. No one claimed responsibility. No government offered explanation. People simply adapted. Trust replaced fear when harm failed to follow. Shade changed too. Its form grew denser, muscle layered with rebuilt core structures no longer governed by implanted restrictions. The command systems embedded in its mind had evolved into instinct, like breath. Yet it remained tethered to Samuel, not by leash or protocol, but something elemental. Respect forged in ruin. One evening, while docked on a remote trade moon, Samuel received a message. No sender. No encryption. Just a single request, asterisk. We need to talk. Face to face. Asterisk coordinates followed. He knew the trap was likely. But he went anyway. At the appointed time, in a neutral zone between trade sectors, he entered the chamber alone. No weapons. No armor. Only his presence. A panel opened, revealing three figures, not soldiers, not agents. Diplomats. Quiet, efficient, polished. The middle one, an older man with graying skin and artificial eyes, spoke first. You've disrupted containment protocols in 6 systems. Samuel said nothing. You've leaked fragments of Project Graven data to unauthorized archives. Still no response. Yet public sentiment is shifting. Colonists call your companion a guardian. Industrial zones are requesting non-hostile patrols. Even private corps are backing off operations in areas your group frequents. He waited. You didn't destroy the war asset, the man continued. You redirected it. We need to understand how. Samuel finally spoke. I didn't do anything. I let it be. The diplomat leaned forward. Are you willing to surrender it? No. Then we'll have to escalate. Shade stepped into view behind Samuel, silent and deliberate. The panel dimmed. The air changed. The diplomat's eyes widened, not in fear, but realization. It's not just following orders. No, Samuel said. It's not following anyone. Back at the yard they received reports. Certain military black sites going dark without violence. Entire crews choosing to walk away. Officials resigning. Leaks multiplying. The galactic public was watching now. The story had become too large to bury. Shade wasn't hiding anymore. Neither was Samuel. One colony constructed a monument, not to victory, but to mercy. A towering sculpture of an armored panther beside an aging man, both standing vigil over a city of glass domes and farmland. No names etched. Just a phrase, asterisk. We were broken. But not beyond repair. Asterisk. Samuel stood before it weeks later, arms crossed. Shade beside him, motionless. A child approached. No fear. No hesitation. It extended a hand. Shade lowered its head. Their eyes met. No growl. No roar. Just quiet understanding. The child smiled and ran back. Samuel looked up at the monument. You ever think we'd be part of something like this? Shade didn't answer. It didn't need to. Far from there, another abandoned research vessel powered up. Unmarked. Buried deep. But this time, a beacon followed it. Not a warning. An invitation. Shade watched it from orbit days later, head tilted. Samuel tapped a console, bringing up the data stream. Another one? Shade blinked once. They changed course. Redemption didn't come with applause. It came with action. Quiet choices. Relentless effort. Samuel had fought to survive. Shade had been made to obey. Now both lived on their own terms, not as tools, not as symbols, but as proof that even what was left for dead could rise, reshape the stars, and guard the path forward.